You wake up one morning and there's a small, dark swelling under your arm. It's tender, warm, about the size of an egg, and growing. You already know what it means. Everyone in the city knows what it means now. You've seen it on the neighbors they carried out feet first last week. You have, at most, a few days. Welcome to the year 1347. The Black Death has arrived, and you, a soft, modern person, with modern medicine and modern hygiene left far behind, are living through the deadliest catastrophe in human history. Could you survive it? Honestly, the odds are terrible. But the truly terrifying part isn't the swelling under your arm. It's that nothing you believe about this disease is true. No one around you can help you, and the enemy killing your entire world is completely invisible. Let me show you what you're actually up against. The plague came from the east, carried along the great trade routes, and it arrived in Europe by ship. When the first plague ships reached the ports of the Mediterranean in 1347, people had no idea what was crawling ashore with them, and what came ashore was smaller than anyone could have imagined. The plague traveled on rats, and on the fleas those rats carried. When an infected rat died, its starving fleas leapt to the next warm body they could find, a person, and bit. That was all it took. The ships that carried grain and silk from the east carried the rats as well, and the rats carried the end of the world in their blood. There's a grim story from just before the plague reached Europe. At a besieged port on the Black Sea, an attacking army riddled with the disease is said to have catapulted its own infected corpses over the walls at the defenders trapped inside, one of the first acts of biological warfare in history. The survivors fled home across the sea. The plague sailed home with them, and once it landed, it moved like fire. Within a few short years, this single disease killed somewhere between a third and a half of everyone in Europe. Not a third of one city, a third of a continent, tens of millions of people, gone in a handful of years. Whole villages emptied. Towns lost so many so fast that there was no one left to bury the dead. Try to picture that. Imagine 1 out of every 2 or 3 people you have ever known, dead within a couple of years, from something no one can see, stop, or explain. That's the world you're standing in. And now let's talk about the thing that's growing under your arm. That swelling is called a bubo. It's your body's lymph nodes, in your armpit, your groin, your neck, swelling grotesquely as they lose the fight against the infection inside you. This is the bubonic plague, the most common form and the one that gives the disease part of its horror. The fever comes, then vomiting. Dark blotches spread across the skin as the flesh beneath begins to die, and more often than not, within days, so do you. Even the bubonic form, the survivable one, killed a large share of the people it touched. But here's the part that should frighten you more. There is a second form, and it doesn't need a flea bite at all. When the infection reaches the lungs, it becomes what we now call the pneumonic plague. And this version spreads through the air, a cough, a breath, being in the same room as a dying person. The pneumonic form kills faster, and it kills almost everyone it touches. There is no swelling to warn you, just a cough, then blood, then the end, sometimes in a single day. And there is even a third form, the rarest and the swiftest of all. When the infection pours directly into the bloodstream, it can kill so fast that a person feels almost well at breakfast and is dead by nightfall, their fingers and toes blackening as the body begins to die from the edges inward. It was that blackening, some believe, that helped give the Black Death its name. Whichever form takes hold, the result around you is the same. The dead pile up faster than the living can bury them. Carts roll through the streets at dawn to collect the bodies. Whole families vanish, their houses left silent behind shuttered windows. In the worst-hit towns, the old rituals of death break down entirely. No prayers, no proper graves, and the dead are simply tipped together into enormous pits at the edge of the city. That is daily life now. That is the ordinary background of your world. So understand your situation. The enemy can travel on a rat, on a flea, on the breath of a stranger, on the air in a sick room. And in 1347, no one on earth understands any of this. Quick thing, because if you want the real history of how our ancestors faced the end of their world, not the myth, the truth, subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep going. Now, back to 1347, because if you're hoping a doctor can save you, I have to take that hope away. Because medieval medicine doesn't just fail against the plague, sometimes it makes things worse. Nobody knows that a tiny living thing, a bacterium, causes this disease. That understanding is more than 500 years away. Instead, the best minds of the age believe the plague is caused by bad air, foul-smelling vapors rising from swamps and rot, poisoning anyone who breathes them. Others are certain it's the alignment of the planets. Many believe simply that it is the wrath of God. And their treatments follow their theories, which means their treatments are useless. Doctors drain your blood, believing they're removing the poison, weakening you exactly when you need your strength. They lance the buboes. They burn strange herbs to drive off the bad air. They press dried toads to your skin. None of it does a thing, except sometimes hasten your death, and the doctors themselves die in droves because they don't understand what they're standing next to. With medicine helpless, people turn to the only weapons they have left: prayer and blame. Some join the flagellants, processions of people who march from town to town whipping their own backs bloody, convinced that if they punish themselves enough, God will lift the plague. It doesn't work, and by gathering in crowds, they often just spread the disease faster. And then comes the darkest human response of all. Terrified, desperate for someone to blame, communities turn on the innocent, accusing outsiders and minorities of causing the plague, and murdering them in horrifying numbers. The disease didn't only kill with fever. It killed through fear, and the cruelty that fear unleashed. This is the world trying to save itself, and none of it works. So if medicine can't help you and faith can't stop it, what actually keeps a person alive? There's really only one answer: distance. The people with the best chance were the ones who could get away, who left the crowded, filthy cities and isolated themselves in the countryside, far from the coughing and the crowds and the rats. The wealthy fled to remote estates and sealed themselves off. Distance from other people was the single most effective defense anyone had. In the years that followed, cities even began to formalize it. Some ports started forcing arriving ships to wait in isolation before anyone could come ashore, a waiting period of 40 days. The Italian word for 40 gave us a word we still use today: quarantine. Without knowing why it worked, they had stumbled onto the one thing that did. But for most people, there was nowhere to run. You couldn't leave your work, your city, your family. You stayed. And staying in a crowded medieval town meant the odds were stacked brutally against you. So, could you survive the Black Death? Maybe. If the swelling under your arm is the bubonic form, you have a real, if frightening, chance. Some people did fight it off and live. If it's reached your lungs, your chances collapse to almost nothing. But notice what your survival does not depend on. Not your strength, not your courage, not your prayers, or your doctor, or anything you can actually do. It comes down to which form of the disease found you, whether you could get away from other people, and pure blind luck. The survivors weren't the strong or the virtuous. They were, very often, simply the ones the plague happened to miss. And here's the takeaway that changes how you see this whole nightmare. The Black Death was never defeated. Let that sink in. No doctor cured it. No prayer stopped it. No king or army could fight it. It simply burned through the population, year after year, until it ran low on people to kill, and then it faded on its own. Humanity didn't win. It endured, and it buried its dead, and it slowly rebuilt from the wreckage. But that wreckage changed the world forever. With so many workers dead, the survivors suddenly found their labor was worth more, and the rigid old order that had bound peasants to their lords began to crack. Out of the greatest catastrophe in human history came, strangely, the first tremors of a freer world. You'd like to think that if you'd been there, you'd have found some way to be clever, to protect yourself, to beat it. But against an enemy no one could see, name, or understand, there was no cleverness that mattered. There was only distance and luck, and most people ran out of both.